A few notes that I would like to preface this video with. I do not condone or endorse harassment of any individual referenced in this video. To defend against this, I will be censoring Discord tags and Twitter handles and other information like that. If you go out of your way to harass people in this video just because they did some fucked up stuff, you're an asshole. Some screenshots in this video may be triggering or otherwise unsightly to some people, including possible homophobia, sexualization of minors, grooming, and other things like this. If you are uncomfortable with this type of stuff, I would highly suggest clicking off the video. Finally, a message specifically directed to a few users. Do not use this video as an excuse to say that you are good people. Just because one of your exposers turned out to be a bad person does not invalidate any of the things you have done. You know who you are, and you know what you did. Hey everyone, Rossiter here. This wasn't an easy video to make. I come bearing a story. A cautionary tale of how you keep yourself composed on the internet. This is an expose of a man who many people liked, and who many people didn't realize his flaws until it was too late. A tragedy of a man who couldn't even bring himself to trust his own friends. One who thought with his nether regions more than his brain. A supposed paladin against internet degeneracy, only to be part of it himself. And the rest of us were none the wiser. Someone who I used to call a friend, until I looked back and realized what he had done. And I chastised myself for not realizing sooner. It's never easy to do something like this about a former friend, but sometimes you just need to come clean and bring things into the proper light. This is the story of Lightningdude. Lightningdude, or Manny for short, is a YouTuber, artist, and musician. Originally, he went under the name SGDR991 and made content for Mugen as well, but those days are long behind him. He's arguably most well known for his videos on a low-quality mobile FPS game, Chicken Gun. He also does content on Fortnite, Dead by Daylight, VR Chat, and of course, Mugen. He's also partially how I met most of my friends that I still talk to today, such as Mosaico, Dr. Plaguey, Toot1996, Tormega, etc. His artwork is mediocre, to say the least. My artwork at the time was too structured and had issues with colors and stuff like that. Manny's art had little to no structure at all, and despite the stiff posing, it looked like everything is about to fall over like a
wacky waving inflatable arm flailing tube man. Wacky waving inflatable arm flailing tube man.
Quite frankly, he is most well known, art-wise, for his exaggerated and possibly disturbing faces that he usually only reserves for shitposts. And his music, well, it ranges from, I could bop to this, to Dear God, did he fall asleep at the sequencer or something? But that was all just a basic introduction to what he does. What I'm about to get into is probably going to start off petty, but then soon enough become downright deplorable. Now, to kick things off, Lightningdude has a lot of issues taking criticism. And I mean a lot. His art has only slightly improved in the 10 years that he's been on the platform. And that's either because he only listens to positive feedback or just doesn't read feedback at all. For example, there was one point where he wanted to write a backstory for one of his characters, Amber. Aurora Doodles and Dr. Plaguey, two members of his server at the time, stepped in to help him out. They gave him some advice on what to include and keep in mind of when writing characters. They also prompted him to redesign Amber because she looks way too much like the Wendy's mascot. More on that later. And as Plaguey proved, a simple hairstyle change was more than enough to get her to look more unique compared to her source material. They also offered references and advice for changes to some of his other characters, and at one point he even outright pinged Plaguey for feedback. What did he do immediately afterwards? Maybe not immediately, but it was a short time afterwards. He blacked out. He made his profile picture a black square, didn't respond to any DMs, to my knowledge, and, well, left some people worried as to why he did this. He's done this several times over the course of me knowing him, including one time where he was gone for an excessively long time, which prompted him to publish a remix of one of his songs, Future Uncertain. Anyways, when he came back, Plaguey asked him what happened. He responded that he needed to take a break from Discord for multiple reasons. Part of them being the aforementioned criticism, partially citing
it was across multiple channels. It was a lot to take in.
Dude, come on. This is a really petty reason to leave people in the dark for 4 days. Criticism's criticism, regardless of how much is given, and you don't even have to listen to all of it. Self-evaluation is an incredibly powerful tool in the creative world if you know how to use it well. Also, for at least one of the 3 channels that you mentioned, you brought it upon yourself by pinging her directly. What I also find really funny is his comment on Newgrounds calling people salty. For context, he turned an image that he and Metal Crow 1105 collaborated on into an animation. Except the animation was very poorly done, using one of those wave animation with your finger mobile apps, if you know what I'm talking about. When people rightfully stated that the animation was really bad, he got upset, and, well, he started hating on the entirety of Newgrounds for it. At one point, I don't have the screenshot, but I specifically remember him saying the piece was animated, but not in the way that they like. Wow, way to not only look like an asshat, but also demonize an entire community in the process. I've personally gotten what you call salty comments on my submissions to that website, but do I care? No! Speaking of myself, I gave him some feedback on a drawing of his at one point. It's not safe for work, so I had to censor it a bunch. Saying that a very specific part of the body was way darker than it should be. Later, he sent me an updated version, and, well, trust me when I say this, but it was barely different at all. So even when he does follow criticism, it usually barely happens. Anyways, he defends his actions of blacking out by saying that Dr. Plaguey has left his server multiple times on occasion as well. The problem with this is that there's no correlation. Plaguey has left the server for multiple reasons, including, but not limited to, lack of server activity, server drama that he is mostly a part of, and personal reasons that require her to get away from Discord that I will go on to later in the video. To my knowledge, whenever he blacks out, it's either due to petty things in the server or relapsing about his ex-girlfriend, again, which he often complained to me about back in the day. And even if she was leaving for a petty reason, it's not an invitation to do the same and not tell anyone about it. Like, I get it. I get it if you have to take a break from Discord, but it's not a good idea to just leave everyone in the dark about it and then blame someone else and justify it by saying they did it first. Speaking of criticism, Lightningdude has a tendency to ignore people for one reason or another, not even giving feedback of his own. This may sound petty to some people, so take it with a grain of salt. But from my point of view, people need feedback in order to continue developing as an artist, whether it's positive or negative. And Manny just doesn't do that with anything he wasn't into. Good example, he completely ignores a post from Aurora Doodles, citing that he's quote-unquote
Not into femboys.
which I get it. If it's fine if you're not into that, but he doesn't even say good job or anything. Is just because it's not his personal preferences. Come on, man. His reasoning for this sort of thing was mainly that he was busy too, which really doesn't add up because he posts his own art over Aurora's and still refuses to respond. He also says that she's trying to get something out of him that he's not into, implying that she's trying to force him to be into femboys, which I highly doubt. I don't understand why he's trying to victimize himself so much. And guess what the result of this interaction was? He took away her mod role. How low can a man get? Especially considering some other server mods had done worse and didn't lose their roles. More on that one later. There's also one more scenario where he's been openly hostile about others' artwork rather than just ignoring them. Plaguey posted a picture of Lukoa from Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid with one of her male OCs, at which point Manny replied, "No comment!" with no apparent context. This is because he simps for Lukoa and he gets jealous when he finds her with other characters, or something like that. Like, dude, what the hell? Lukoa doesn't belong to you. You aren't dating her, and she's not even an OC of yours or anything. She's like a full-scale AAA anime character. Other people can draw their characters with her. Christ. Also, imagine being so petty that you don't give your friends credit for their ideas and suggestions just because they don't like you anymore. And then using that as your reason to not give credit. This perfectly segues into what is probably going to be the biggest part of the video. Lightningdude is a very raunchy man. He's often too horny for his own good, and is pretty likely to sneak an innuendo somewhere if he can. Now, let me preface this by saying that there's nothing wrong with having intense hormones, or having a waifu/husbando and fantasizing about them. In fact, I'm willing to admit to having one myself. But there are lines that you shouldn't cross when doing so. Great example, the last thing I just mentioned. Like I said, sure you can fantasize about Lukoa, but she doesn't belong to you. Another pretty big example is Toot 1996 OC Sabrina. Manny was very obsessive regarding her, which I find a little weird. And he even edited himself having sex with her at one point, without his permission. Well, Toot himself and the character Sabrina are both adults, so it's not really as bad as one would expect, but still, I think it's pretty weird, in my opinion. Even disregarding waifu obsessions, he's also made some very weird statements that have made people very uncomfortable. For example, this piece about Ayame, which is Dr. Plague's main OC, and this one about Sherry, which is one of Aurora Doodle's OCs. I think I'll get into it more later in the video, but yeah, just make it this what you will. Another thing is that he's a massive fucking hypocrite. Remember Tato, the guy that sexualized other people's OCs and was toxic towards people who gave constructive criticism? Yeah, if you've paid attention to this video at all, you'd know that Manny does the exact same thing and is just virtual signaling in order to make himself seem like a saint. All of his female OCs have massive tits and basically no backstory to them. And that even includes his quote-unquote main female OC, Jessica. Look at this basic-ass fit and tell me there's character development at all. Talk about objectification. In addition, he's also made Dr. Plague and Aurora Doodles uncomfortable with very sexual comments about their OCs Ayame and Sherry, respectively, openly stating that he would smash them and masturbate to them whenever they posted. Which, yeah, I get it. It's a not safe for work channel, and they're posting not safe for work artwork, but the least you could do is show a little bit of respect for the characters, and, you know, care for them and their creators. Manny practically didn't show interest in them unless they were sexualized, but it gets worse. Plague was, like, directly uncomfortable with some of the things that Manny has said, but he just didn't care, as I'll prove later in the video. But it gets worse. What if I told you some of the characters that he really likes aren't even of age? Yep, you read that right. For a good while, he allowed underage not safe for work content in the not safe for work channels of his server, allowing members to share not safe for work content of underage characters from anime and video games, and even commenting on a few pieces himself. Low-key insanity that he was able to get away with this for so long. Manny himself has also made not safe for work art of Spooky from Spooky's Jump Scare Mansion. I'm pretty sure he's made 2, but I only managed to find 1. And one of his waifus, akin to Lukoa, was the Wendy's mascot, who was based on a real-life 8-year-old girl. And before you say, they're aged up so it's fine, I find it extremely weird to age up a character for the purpose of sexualizing them, especially if they never get aged up in canon. It wasn't until a mod of his server, D, stepped in order to fix the problem. They created a new rule where you had to post the name and age of any character you post in those channels. And, well, someone didn't like those rules very much. Multiple people actually, but more specifically, Shimmering Brony / Toon Alex Sora 007 / Alex, as he states himself. I may be going off track here, but Shimmering Brony was not really a great person. I never liked Alex all that much, mostly due to the fact that he inserted his fetishes into basically everything he's made, including his Mugen characters. But the most unsettling part about him is that he freely expresses his interest in lolicon, which isn't good for obvious reasons. Oh yeah, and if you don't believe me and think he's changed since the time in Manny's server, he made this thing allegedly as an April Fool's joke. I went to go verify its existence and saw that as early as this April he liked porn of Nezuko from Dragon Slayer. She's canonically 14, by the way. And what he stated in response to the new rules was, that moment when a trio of dorks controls what you post, all because one of them is paranoia. I don't want to waste my energy looking up ages before posting. And I specifically remember him saying that he, quote-unquote, has his own server to post stuff in, before promptly leaving the server. Holy shit, you are so dense. First of all, calling D paranoid is idiotic and asinine. Discord's TOS bans all forms of underage not safe for work content, so like, even if they were just being paranoid, you can't really blame them for that. Secondly, it really isn't that hard to just look at Google and find a character's age. Most of the time, anyway. Oh yeah, and let's not forget the time that Shim simped hard for Donde Era's Sona, to the point of drawing like lewd fan art of it and stuff like that. When I tried telling Shim that Don was racist and sexist and transphobic, he went to ask him and came back saying that Don's response was that it was fake, and suddenly everyone had a pity party and stopped believing me. Even though I have ample reason to believe that those screenshots were real, based on the responses from his friends Joey and Dronk. Again, I know this might come off as random and out of place, but it perfectly ties right into my next point. Shimmering Brony, despite all of his actions, is one of the moderators in his server who was never demoted at all. In fact, the entire time I had known him, he was a mod in Manny's server right up until he left the server on that day. Meanwhile, people like Plague and Aurora were chastised for minor infractions, like upsetting Manny or spamming. Manny didn't even ban Shim for being basically a pedo, yet he would punish people who are a lot more reasonable. For example, he's mistreated Plaguey, her brother Mura, and his good friend Kuro because they were making some slightly off-kilter jokes towards each other, including some that are a bit racy. The thing is, all of them are black. They can make those jokes. It really shouldn't be a problem, but, well, here we are. One pretty rough example is when Kuro was joking around with a friend, and Manny got upset and told them to stop. Kuro said no, supposedly in a joking manner, so Manny immediately kicked him from the server. He came back, but afterwards he and Manny argued for a bit, and he had to promise not to start anything again. Later, Kuro posted a Five Nights at Freddy's meme with some admittedly pretty disturbing audio, at which point Manny deleted it for being not safe for work. Kuro asked why, and As a result, instead of explaining his reasoning in a reasonable human manner, Manny permabanned him. Because of this, Mura stepped in and tried to get him to explain his reasoning. Instead of actually making any points, however, Manny just said,
"Are you trying to justify someone who's trying to piss me off?"
and gets incredibly defensive because he has no proper argument. Kuro set his status to something where he was complaining about mods who abuse their powers. Might have been a different scenario, but I don't know. So another mod got on his case about it because they thought he was referring to Manny. Manny did talk to them about it, but he wasn't nearly as strict to them as he was to Plague and Kuro. Such as the time they were jokingly antagonizing each other, replying to each other with emojis before Manny got mad at them for spamming and then put Mura in timeout for posting an emoji as a joke. Maybe Kuro's status about people abusing their power was directed after him after all. He thinks they're being toxic, which probably stems from dealing with Tato for years, but Tato is actually a toxic person. These two are, well, they're just kids joking around. Another example of this is how he thinks of one of my friends, Mosaico. A few years ago, Manny ratted him out to his whole server and talked shit about him because he posted this meme.
Thank you fans for naming BTS the best boy band on earth. We love you. Now on with the show. Ching chong, ting ling ting.
Hold it right there, losers. Nani? Buckle Street boys?
And admittedly, it was kind of racist. And yeah, I get it. Mosaico fucked up. But there's two things I have to say about that. One, it was popular to make fun of BTS back in the day. So he was probably just following the trends. And two, he was just a kid. He was like 14 or something when he actually posted that meme. He wasn't like trying to be racist or anything, just being like the cool kids and making fun of BTS. And now he's 18. He probably realizes that it's kind of offensive now. And the thing is, Manny continued to hold this grudge from when he posted that to the time I stopped talking to him. He's completely ignorant of change. Which I find really funny considering one of his close friends at the time was pretty much a pedo. Despite this, Toot, Janet, and I still tried to be friends with him. And as you can see from this video, this didn't end up voting all for us. If you didn't think the stuff he's done so far was awful already, or at the very least weird and kind of unsettling, then this next bit will hopefully change that. This next section takes the cake for absolute depravity. This section involves a currently 18-year-old girl, Busy Love, who gave me permission to share these details, by the way, who Manny talked to from 2020 to 2022. And let me tell you, this was really bad. It started when Busy first joined Manny's server. I don't know what exactly prompted her to join his server, but it was at this point that Manny started talking to her, and he seemed to have a very heavy interest in her OC Kushi. To the point where he'd start making some really suggestive fan art of Kushi. Busy was 15 at the time. Now, I was aware of some of these images, not all of them, and both myself and Busy, in our infinite wisdom as hormone-induced teenagers, didn't call this stuff out. I do take partial blame in this, but Manny should have known better as a 26-year-old man than to make rather suggestive art of a 15-year-old's OC. What makes it worse is that he's well aware of Busy's age, and despite that, he still simps for Kushi. As if the shit with Ayame, Sherry, and Sabrina weren't bad enough. And get this, he says the reason they don't talk anymore is because she's quote-unquote moody. Like, what the hell? I don't know very many people who are more depraved than this. And then he goes on to say,
"I don't touch moody girls.
Dude, that sounds fucking wrong. Stop.
Unless they're pale and mature and willing."
What do you mean, pale? Got a bit of internalized racism in there or something? Oh, but it gets worse. Busy had the kindness to share her DMs with Manny, with the people who made the documents on him, and oh my god, it gets so much worse. Remember how Manny edited himself having sex with other people's characters and or making weird solicited comments towards them? Yeah, he straight up drew a full not safe for work piece of himself having sex with Kushi. Without her permission. When she was like 15 or 16. When I first saw this, I gagged. I can't stomach myself looking at this. Like, I know it sounds dramatic, but this is someone I know. This is someone I talk to from time to time. Hell, this is someone I, like, actually bought a commission from at one point. It just hits different when you know someone to that level, you know what I mean? And the DMs he had with her are just chilling. Do keep in mind that these DMs are in Spanish, since English is not Busy's first language, so I will be providing translations for those who do not speak it.
That. Esther?
Yes.
Nice. I must show the other two lewds. Therefore the face.
Off to a great start. Getting really weird and such.
There's a full, right?
There's my arm, haha.
I can see.
You. I am half naked, and with a boner.
Ah. Sorry, I'll ask later.
Haha, but I have boxers.
Alright, this is fucked up to say to anybody, let alone a 15-year-old. I genuinely can't understand why anyone would think saying this shit is a good idea. Alright, this is where things really go downhill. Before I start this, please do not witch hunt Busy or say stuff like, well, she shouldn't have said that to him or encouraged it. First of all, teenagers have hormones. That's a normal thing. And somebody who was a teenager around this time too, I also had intense hormones. I understand her. And besides, that doesn't change the fact that she was a minor and Manny was 26 fucking years old.
I have a question. H-E.
A.
Well, I was wondering, I don't know how old you are.
Well, I'm an adolescent. I'm 15 years old.
Oh.
Just because I'm young doesn't mean I'm stupid.
I didn't say that.
They lent me a tablet. My anatomy was bad there because I was sleepy, but I've been practicing. Well, the truth is, if I wanted to see those drawings you made, sorry, I'm curious. Sorry if I wanted to see it, but if it has my character, can't I see it?
I'm a little worried. I'm really 26 years old.
Hey, it's okay. I have seen many things. I know your character is there naked, but I have no problem with that.
He has to have some responsibility in making sure that she doesn't receive not safe for work content, but despite that...
I'm awake.
Awake asterisk.
From a long day at work. Yes.
I really tired. But I have nothing to do. That's why I opened the commissions.
Okay. Is it okay if I draw such things?
Yes. I don't have a problem.
Thanks.
He's still encouraging not safe for work topics with her. This is grooming. You can't do this shit to someone who's below the age of consent and get away with it scot-free. I don't know why I continue to talk to you, but you need to get your shit together. Maybe get some therapy or something. Fuck off.
Lucoia. So good.
I was using her for reference. And some colors.
Oh. She's nice, too.
Yeah. You cared for Luco only.
See, I downloaded the Kushi pic you made, and the other one of his dress. Kushi is still emo. I'll change my profile pic if you want.
This is as recently as March 2022. Jesus fucking Christ. This interaction basically sums up everything about Manny and pretty much everything in this document. I could probably get away with just posting this screenshot in a community tab, and it would perfectly summarize everything you need to know about him. But obviously I know people wouldn't be satisfied with just one screenshot of the situation, so we're here. I asked Busy for comment on this whole situation, and she had this to say.
Well, honestly, I don't like how he didn't care what the fuck you made. If it wasn't horny stuff. That's everyone agrees with. At first he was nice. Kind of shitty from him to be openly horny with me at the time when I wasn't even capable to make decisions. He's a grown-ass adult, not an stupid kid like me. Then later I opened my eyes when he threw me away like a garbage bag. I assume he later blocked me because of the shit he did with me, drawing porn, but when we talked this in a group to make a doc about him, he said it was because I was harsh. When that wasn't the case. I just called him out because in that time he called my friend Mosaico racist for a fucking joke about BTS and the Backstreet Boys. That's how stupid he is. And he never apologized, so we just left him and kicked him from our friend server. I just think he only cares about himself and sex. And he worshipped one of his friends and copied his art style. I'm not gonna mention him. BTW, he later deleted all of the cushy art he made for me from his DeviantArt, for the reason we asked him. Which is still scummy how he blocked me from everywhere when I wasn't even angry at him. Literally later I opened my eyes on what he did.
Later, in 2022 or so, Manny blocked Busy on DeviantArt and deleted all of his fan art of Kushi, to which Busy was left in the dark about for the longest time. And he has the audacity to call her moody because they didn't talk for much for a period of time. Fuck right off. At one point, Manny DM'd the publisher of the document, Dr. Inosuke, about the situation, pretty much admitting to what he did, and supposedly willing to apologize. Inosuke asked him to answer some questions regarding his actions, and here's how he responded.
At the time, I was really infatuated with the OC. I had that scenario in mind.
Yeah, we already knew that much.
She made use of the character. I thought she would be okay with it, but doing this was wrong.
Oh, so he plays the I thought she was okay with it card. Full stop. You don't make not safe for work of a minor's OC. And regardless of her age, how do you not think to ask her for permission first? How does that not click with your phallic-shaped brain? Inosuke continues on, pretty much saying what I just said. Then, Manny goes on some kind of off-topic tangent and mentions the BTS thing, which he still has a grudge for, over nearly 4 years or so later. Then he goes on some kind of defeatist attitude, saying how he's trash and that he's a hopeless nobody and shit like that, which is kind of similar to how Tato freaks out when people saw the archives and shit, but this time less aggressive and a lot more defeatist and guilt-trippy. Inosuke then goes on a bit of a tangent about stuff that was featured in the document, talking about his comments toward Plague and Aurora, him trying to guilt-trip and use the victim card, based on what Crow has said about what he goes through in his life, and finally about his fictional crushes. After this, it seems like Manny didn't pay attention to anything and just brushes it off as repeating things before promptly ending the conversation and blocking them. Until he shut down most of his social media accounts, he was deleting comments and stuff relating to the controversy, and even continued to commission art of his OCs despite everything. Doesn't put a good look on you when you continue to go about your days if nothing happened, Manny. Well, that's pretty much everything that I know about from other people's perspectives, but now it's time for one of the reasons that I decided to make this video in the first place. I have my own experiences with Lightningdude that I would like to share. I first met Lightningdude on one of Tato's videos when I was around 15, 16 years old, on which he commented,
"This video is clickbait."
Because his messy chimera of stolen assets he calls a self-insert was going up against 3 other self-inserts. Oliver, Mavo, who's not actually a self-insert anymore by the way, and Rick Reynolds. Tato was complaining about his existence, and I tried to defend him to get Tato to stop replying to the trolls. At which point Manny fills me in by telling me 95% of his character is copied from Nick Cooper, and that he's done a shit ton of other stuff, so I told him to prove it. And he does, by sending me the Krustin Archives. As I mentioned in the last documentary video, the Krustin Archives was a massive and slightly transphobic collection of stuff that Tato has done from a few images in 2012, and kept it getting updates until around mid-2022. This evidence, and Tato's insistence on hiding his past from me, prompted me to make a diss track on him, which I still really want to remaster, by the way. Manny saw the track and commented, "You, sir, are a cactus."
LOL.
At which point, we started talking in the comments. He invited me to his server, at which point we started talking in DMs, and brought up the opportunity of collaborating. And our first collab song, Diamondized, I'd say was a success. But the first red flag popped up with the creation of his very next collab, which he decided to title Waifus. Do you see how this is a problem? He was also pressing me to send a waifu that I had. Keep in mind, I was 16 at the time. And I ultimately decided to send him Kana from Blaster Master 02. Which he then proceeded to lewdly comment about in response, and then proceeded to add her to the thumbnail alongside his underage Wendy's mascot waifu. I have a feeling this character is going to haunt me forever. I like to state that while I take a little bit of the blame for not bringing this stuff to light earlier, and not calling it out, I, like Busy, simply let my hormones get the best of me. And Manny should have known better than to make these lewd comments, especially as a 25, 26-year-old at the time, to a 16-year-old. Throughout my time talking to Manny, he's brought up a lot of topics that, quite frankly, aren't fit to load onto a 16, 17-year-old. Such as trauma dumps about his ex-girlfriend and how she got with a supposedly abusive partner. And also leaked her real face to me, by the way.
Girls these days consider me an abomination, so I vent and stay single.
Yeah, maybe I should have taken that more seriously. Here's more stuff about him venting about past relationships. Partially blaming her for some of his meltdowns and wreaking pure incel. Also mentioning how a certain Gillette commercial apparently bastardized men. Wonder why I didn't pick up on this right away? I shared with him some progress on my old Five Nights in Anime fan game. You can't get it anymore, by the way. And he seemed to comment that he liked it in a potentially lewd manner. The emoji's giving off sussy vibes, to be honest. He complained to me about Mick Cooper, the guy who made Nick, and didn't even really elaborate as to why. He just mentions that he reminds him of her ex-girlfriend. She's living rent-free in your head, dude. Also brought up his infatuation with Toots OC Sabrina again. Why do you feel the need to bring that up to a minor? And why is he implying that he simps for her just as much as you do Lokoa and your other waifus? I released a song called Thick Shake on Audius back in January 2020. This was before I understood that Audius was heavily promoting crypto schemes and just wanted a place to put my shit. He decided to remix it a month later and had Maddled Crow 1105 make this very weird thumbnail art. I would be somewhat fine with it nowadays, given that I'm an adult and all that, but he had this done when I was 16, which, looking back, was very weird and unsettling. And he said that my single cover was suggestive, so he did the same. I'm sorry, does this look suggestive to you? I told him that it wasn't really suggestive, to which he said,
I guess my mind thinks that way.
And
I was focused on something else.
Implying that he was, like every other character, paying more attention to her tits than anything else. Wow, Manny, self-report much? To a minor's OC of all things? Oh yeah, and he backpedals and has the nerve to call Tato weird for calling me a creepy-ass bastard because I made a FNIA fan game. I still find it really funny that he called me that, by the way. I remember Manny tried to do a collab with a musician named Extant? Exfort? How do I pronounce that? Only to get turned down because he didn't know how to mesh their styles together. He claimed he wasn't bitter about the whole thing, but then he proceeded to bring him up again in a negative light multiple times. I made a drawing of Paris Cat from Battle Cats back in the day, which he seemed to take quite a bit of interest in. Like, great job, maybe keep yourself more composed around a minor, maybe? Manny kept complaining to me about Mosaico and the meme he posted, which again, proves that he holds grudges and doesn't understand that people grow and change. Mosaico was just a dumb kid back then. He was just following the trends, and now he's older and he's more mature, yet Manny just continues to hold this hostility towards him until the very end. For my 17th birthday, he made this drawing, which I find really weird. He makes me look like the biggest coomer ever, and it's really off-putting. Probably the art piece which made me realize that I would be very uncomfortable with not safe for work stuff with my Sono. And I was a bit unnerved by it back then too. I was just afraid to tell him. I was afraid of losing friends back then, and I didn't want to sound ungrateful, so I never did tell him. I remember he shared a bit of not safe for work one time from a specific controversial artist, controversial in quotes, who blamed the January 6th riots on Gamergate and Anita Sarkeesian. Which, don't get me wrong, Anita Sarkeesian is kind of dumb sometimes, but to blame her for January 6th is fucking tone deaf as hell. And he said he didn't know, but he also confessed that he had masturbated to it again anyways later, to again, me, a person who was a minor at the time. One time we were discussing not safe for work of Cookie Run characters, and he told me that he wouldn't smash Chili Pepper Cookie because, quote unquote,
her color does not feel right, emo.
Okay, yeah, this is edging into racism territory. Not saying that you have to be into her, it's just, that's a really sussy reason to not like a specific character. It's also funny considering that it isn't even the least common color for a cookie to come in. I think the most disgusting thing he's done to me is right here. He asked for my age with pretty much no prior context, so I told him I was still 17. He then gave me his server's not safe for work role, basically unprompted. Holy fucking shit! There's no way that he hasn't had a lobotomy or something, because Jesus Christ! I think a lot of people in that server, including myself, take a small amount of responsibility for not calling it out earlier. But Manny has absolutely got to take the most blame for this, because no sane man would allow a minor access to not safe for work while knowing they were a minor. He's also sent me multiple unsolicited pictures of Kana, 2 of which were, again, while I was still 17. And also mentioned this, that I was drawing a character, and he asked if it was lewd, just because the character had tits. I'm still asking myself how I didn't pick up on these and leave him earlier, because Jesus fucking Christ. Looking back at it, I don't know how I kept talking to him. We would go on to talk about more not safe for work stuff here and there. Eventually I stopped talking to him around May or June of 2022. I don't know how much of what he's done after that, but eventually I blocked him after Plague told me of his other shenanigans. It was only when the documents came out in November that I actually remembered the shit he said to me. And that's basically my experience with him. There's probably more stuff that happened on his server, but that place got nuked, I'm pretty sure. My experience with Manny should be a striking explanation as to why minors should not be allowed in not safe for work places. And I hope that after watching this, any other friends of Lightningdude seriously reconsider their relationship with this awful, awful human being. And now we enter that segment of the video where we get to laugh. In November 2022, Manny made a massive response comment to this document, and so did Mantled Crow 1105 to a lesser degree. Before we continue with this segment, it's worth noting that Crow had supposedly cut ties with Lightningdude as of writing the script, citing some of his actions and the drama being too much for him personally. We've also theorized that that's why Manny deleted all of his social media accounts. So take this upcoming bit with a grain of salt.
I admire the huge documents you made to make a point about my issues and problems. However, I would like to note that you also have a tendency to talk about men you also like, and say what to do to them, or what you would like them to do to you. They're not saying kinky though, but I don't say anything.
Off to a really funny start, where Manny just misinterprets the entire point of that segment. Newsflash, it's okay to have a waifu or husbando. It's not okay to obsess over them to the point where you make it most of your personality. Or get mad at people for doing stuff with them. And stuff like that. Plague doesn't make being into her fictional husbandos most of her personality. And she also doesn't just randomly tell people that she masturbates to other people's characters.
That being said, it feels as if you just don't get enough commentary as much as you'd like. Whenever someone else like Sandville Extraordinaire said something to you to a game on page 2 there, you didn't mention anything negative about that.
That's because Extraordinaire, nowadays known as Gamma Blaster or Janet, actually cares about the characters themselves. And she stopped making those comments when Plague brought that up to her. Unlike you, she wants to be respectful towards her friends and doesn't like making them uncomfortable.
On page 3, Aurora asks, how bad are you for Sherry? I don't believe it makes sense for you to beg on me and my oasis when you also have a similar mindset.
No correlation. Also, again, having waifus isn't the problem. The problem is how obsessive you get over them to the point where it becomes your whole personality. And unlike everyone else in this document, you openly state that you masturbate to their OCs and draw yourself having sex with the aforementioned OCs without permission, which I would understand why that would make them uncomfortable. There's a fine line between fiction and reality, and you tend to blur that line way too often.
Regarding page 5, I took a break from Discord because I didn't wish to come across as rude when you continued to give advice, and I already told you that I want to work at my own pace.
Are you forgetting about how you purposely left her out of the know and told Dee and Janet about why you took your quote-unquote break instead? Wouldn't you consider that rude?
Art, whatever opinion you have on mine currently is fine, does take time and has a process.
Yes, all of us understand that. Take a look at my first digital drawing way back in 2018. All the way to my most recent one that I did on May 1st. I could only get this far because of constructive criticism from other users. Massive shout out to Walk and Chase 2006, by the way. Your feedback and guidance has been invaluable to my art's development. And it's something that you just can't seem to stomach at all. You've taken basically none of Plague's or Aurora's advice, and you just disappear when actually presented with proper criticism of your work.
If you acknowledge you have left the server several times due to your issues, why can't you sympathize?
Because I don't think that "I got me quite hurt by you with the criticism" isn't really a valid reason to ghost Plague and the others for 4 days, and then refuse to talk to Plague about why you left.
I don't believe my reply about your wits on page 11 should have gotten you upset.
Hey buddy, you're not Plague. You can't decide how she feels about a quite frankly unwanted, unconstructive, and rude comment about the artwork of Lucoa. Or should I say, no comment.
On page 18, I regret having Jim and Astro in the server. I also regret having acknowledged the stuff they posted/made. The change Daniel made stayed and will stay. The two just weren't listening. The TOS stuff I learned of as well. I had made a personal change to make sure to look up pages from now on.
At least you adopted the changes, but it doesn't really change the fact that Dee and Aurora had to get involved in order to actually get this stuff fixed. Plus, you never actually did anything regarding Shim. He left on his own accord when the rules were officially implemented.
On page 25, you didn't mention Coral and Morris spam regarding that 1 million from Despicable Me, which had me silence them for 5 minutes. The stuff that happened after I apologized for and I thought we had settled it. Coral and Morris spam emotes, and it doesn't have to be the same emote to be considered spam in the general channel, so I did take action.
No, they didn't. They were replying to each other with emojis within a reasonable time frame between each other, which doesn't really constitute spam. Plus, you never apologize to them personally, you just apologize to someone else instead, usually Plague.
I don't think page 32 was necessary. It contributed less to the issue and more what you don't like about things I have said and niche things.
I literally have zero clue what he was talking about here. I checked page 32 on the document, and it was just more stuff about him unfairly treating Kuro, so,
Page 34 has me confused you used racial slurs on Mora as jokes, but when a non-family member person does something, you defend it.
Oh, I don't know. Because they're literally family? They are bound to tease each other like that. And besides, Plague, Mura, and Kuro are all black. They're allowed to make those jokes and say those words. And I can personally attest to this because I have seen Plague's IRL face before in a VC one time. And furthermore, Mura and Kuro are not as toxic as Manny says they are. When Mura first joined Manny's server, he offered to draw characters for people for free. This includes this great piece that I got from him. And Kuro was among the first people to console Plague when her chihuahua passed away. How's that for toxic?
Overall, I read the document and this is what I have to say. I feel as though you've written this out of emotional distress.
Imagine being so narcissistic that you ignore literally everything placed in front of you, and you just pass it off as emotional distress. Genuinely, how pathetic do you have to be?
I hate that I have stopped speaking to a very talented person who I have paid money for in Patreon, and stuff that I have caused, and other things as well, has contributed to the end. I did apologize for my errors and mistakes, but I don't believe it helps to insult my personal image and tastes.
I find it so incredibly telling that up front you say you'd hate to lose people like D, Aurora, and Plague, yet you're willing to suddenly distance yourself from friends that did so much as post one thing that you didn't like. Or in the case of Busy, for seemingly no reason at all. And in the case of Mosaico, you continue to hold that grudge for years. And yet you pull this type of shit on me, Plague, and many others. You have no room to speak. And now for Crow's comparatively much shorter response. Like I said earlier, Crow has supposedly cut ties with Manny, so take what is stated in this response with a heavy grain of salt.
I actually have seen you leave the server a bunch of times and give Manny so much critique. Seriously, you guys are throwing walls of text at him in those screens. He said it was a lot.
I already went over this. Plague had quite frankly much better reasons for leaving than Manny did to go dark. Your vagueness also doesn't help your point. What about those walls of text made him upset? And are you also forgetting the fact that these two walls happened at completely different times? Is Kuro just not allowed to use the vent channel for its intended purpose? Manny is almost 30 years old at this point. He should be able to take criticism on his own without needing to be babied about everything. And he absolutely shouldn't be labeled the fun police.
He only goes black because he needs breaks for his own health and he doesn't like to be rude. You need to extend your arguments for own personal issues, especially Irel, that require her to get space from people to him as well. Putting it mildly, he does have a lot on his plate, Irel.
Again, Crow is just incredibly vague about the whole situation, and not giving any details to actually back up his already flimsy point. This extends to basically any time he talks about Manny and his issues, being incredibly vague and just saying, dude, trust me. Also, Plague decided to be the bigger person and came out with why she's been leaving servers and such instead of just leaving it vague.
She's struggling keeping up with 2 jobs to the point where her body is giving up on her and will shut down, causing her physical pain. Even her mental health has gotten worse. She struggles with depression even to this day and have suicidal thoughts. None attempted, but she has thoughts and doesn't talk to anyone about in fear of people either not taking her seriously or telling her to get over it. Yes, it has happened to her before.
Moving on.
It doesn't look like you're taking criticism especially well yourself in a couple of these screens. Your annotations to the screen of him saying no comment, for example.
Here's the thing, that's not criticism. That's just being rude and unhelpful. None of that's actually pointing out anything she can do to fix her art or make it better. No suggestions, no nothing. Manny was literally just butthurt that his totally real dragon wife was drawn with another man.
Also, we purged that because I advised him to. Not him, me. This is because we need to improve ourselves and set a better example, and I'm quite sure the mobs take that down anyway.
Nice job shooting your former best friend in the foot, by the way. This only proved that Manny was further unwilling to actually do anything about the minors and not safe for work situations deal, and that he had to be pressured by his friends in order to actually change anything.
Shim was kicked because he's the creeper in his own merits.
Blatant lie, Shim was never kicked, he left on his own accord. No mod action was ever taken against him.
And Tato is mocked because he doesn't ask for consent with other people's ox.
Extremely ironic, considering Manny did literally the exact same thing to Sabrina and Kushi. Not to mention you just badmouth Plague and disinterpret her words as scum, when in reality she was just trying to help out, just trying to help him become a better artist, you know? Yet both of you seem to be very offended by that. I hope that, after these past few months, Crow, you've taken a moment to reconsider your stance on this whole situation, given how awfully flimsy all that logic was. And I'll start by saying that cutting ties with Manny was a good start. And one more thing, I've already said this regarding Tato, but not everyone is going to trust you after your association with Manny. That's just something you'll have to get used to. And while I'm willing to make up after these situations, not everyone will be too, and you just have to let them go. And that's about all the time I have for this video. I hope that you all learned a few things from this whole situation, and that you are more careful with your interactions online. Take it from me, Plague, Busy, and all the people that Manny has had a negative effect on over the years. One final message for Manny directed from Plague.
My message to Manny is that he should have thought twice before doing the things he did. We gave him a chance to redeem himself, we told him to face it, but he hid like a coward, and continued to ignore it until people would forget the vile shit he's done. The internet is forever, and no one will forget the things he did. I hope he'll change and grow as a person.
With that being said, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you want to see more content like this, leave a comment down below. And without further ado, this is Rossiter signing out. Peace.